Welcome to the Strive for Good Life podcast, where freedom and abundance meet entrepreneurship. We uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets of business owners who've built life on their terms. Ready to create your own success? Let's dive in.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Strive for Good Life podcast. My name is Nino, Pingera, and I'm here with Ivana Ivanek, who is a keynote speaker, business strategist, and mindset coach. We're going to have a really great conversation today. So welcome to the show, Ivana.
Stoked to be here and I can't wait.
I'm glad you used the word stoked. I love that. It's a lot of fun. I'm really excited to jump into your story and everything you're doing now. So let's just start at the beginning like we always do. How did you get into business in the first place? What inspired you? And tell me a little bit about that process.
That process, Nino, has been a long one, but I make it short and juicy. Imagine a little girl of an immigrant family. My family immigrated from Serbia to Austria shortly before the Yugoslavia war. So my parents were working their behind off to make sure that my siblings and I are having education, stability, and everything that the parent wishes for their children. So my path to pave the corporate ladder was paved. It was going to school, going to university, finding a job, preferably as a doctor and a lawyer, because this was my parents' way of thinking what success means, and growing up in a safe city. No, I don't know if I could have wished for more, but I literally did wish for more. I felt almost my entire life guilty for striving for more, literally. I always enjoyed education, but never the educational path. Sitting in school thinking like why I needed to know everything about the amoeba virus. And nobody could explain to me how Beyonce formed her band's Destiny's Child, being only 9 years old, because I was observing her journey and I was seeing on TV that opportunities seem to be everywhere to live a different life than I was living. I found my life boring. I found the people boring. Like back in the days, this is how I would phrase it. I would say, you are all so prude. You all don't know anything about life, saying as a 15-year-old girl, being really nasty. But deep within, I was just feeling a void. I wanted to travel the world, which wasn't for us because we didn't have the money. I wanted to live by the ocean, which also wasn't for us because there is no jobs by the ocean. Like islands are low economy countries. What you gonna do there? I wanted to do work as someone who helps people, not knowing what, but I knew it's not going to be a doctor because this was just something that I didn't see myself studying for 10 years. I was just like, this is too long. And I wanted to be famous. And fast forward, what sounded like a little girl's dream is pretty much the life that I'm living right now, except for being famous. Because at some point, I just dropped corporate life and I went in search of what was supposedly not for me. Quit my job despite the promotions, invested a ton of money into education, became a mindset and health coach back in the days. And there I was, 24 years old, determined to prove that I can run a business and design my own life. Only 4 years later, what happened was that my whole big dream shattered and I hit rock bottom mentally, physically, and financially, which has gotten me back into corporate life again. And this is where I actually think that my personal growth journey and what has gotten me really to be here to live by the ocean in the Caribbean has actually started, which took another 8 years of hard work, mentors, psychologists, and money that I didn't have.
I love that. Okay, so you just felt out of place as a child. You felt like there was more to life. You felt like you were supposed to be doing something different than what everyone else was doing. I feel like that's really common in entrepreneurs. They see different opportunities that maybe others don't. But you said something interesting. You said that you felt guilt with that. And so I want to dig into that because I think a lot of people maybe feel a sense of guilt for doing something different or wanting different things. And maybe like they don't have a right to those things that are different. So maybe, speak to that. Why do you think there was such a sense of guilt and what did you do to overcome that?
It was guilt towards my parents because I was a very sensitive child and I did observe literally everything that was happening around me. I know how hard their life was to sustain me. So now I was feeling guilty for not feeling grateful enough for what they have done for me. But I think if I would have known how to communicate it well, that like I was sitting alone with this because simply there was no entrepreneurship in my family. There was nobody to guide me. We had farmers in Serbia, which were very successful people making a lot of money from their land. And then we had the immigrant family, the working class. And I just never learned to explore other options. And there was a sense of that, asking for help was a sign of weakness. So I was sitting in that corner alone. And I think this was breeding ground for guilt because whatever I did felt somewhat like I'm doing it secretly. I'm doing it against all odds. I'm doing it although I'm not allowed to. Now, of course, in retrospect, I do understand why I wasn't allowed to do certain things, or not allowed is maybe even the wrong word. I was always warned that this is risky, which has always made me more insecure than I was. But in retrospect, I understood it was just loving parents wanting to protect their daughter from pain and from failure, which was something super scary. So my way to overcome this was, I was really stubborn to start it for business. And now looking back, I shouldn't have. It has cost me so much money, my health, my sanity, my confidence at that time, and I needed to rebuild everything. But how I got really out of that is to understand that um, if I choose to live a different life, I can do it by respecting everything that has happened so far, respecting my family and their choices, by learning to communicate, and by learning that failure is not the end of your story.
I love
So
it. Okay.
these two things were so important for me to understand that, because I was longing for permission of my family. I wanted that validation, and every time I didn't get it, I was getting more stubborn and within more sad, simply because I was like, "Yeah, can't you see? Like, I have a dream and you don't get it." And whatever I was telling to them, it was horrible scenes at home, because I was just really like it was a riot day after day.
Interesting. So I love that you bring it back to communication, because I think that's so important. Being able to communicate your vision, being able to communicate your desires and advocate for yourself, right? I think when you're younger, I mean, that's something that I certainly had to develop. That came very rough for me, and I could share stories about different conversations that I've had in my life that I really struggled with, that I really had to work through, that ended up being really big breakthroughs, though, once I was able to have those conversations. So I think that's really fascinating. Um, I think ultimately, I mean, obviously in entrepreneurship, you have to be able to take risks. And so this idea that your parents were trying to protect you and keep you safe, I understand that mindset, right? But how were you able to, or what, um, maybe seeing their experience, what was it about you that you wanted to take the risk, that wanted to put yourself out there, and what was driving that? I'm really curious.
Mm. I haven't answered these questions in a while like this, because I have to go really far back. It was really simple. I was living a life where I can do whatever I want. So now it does start with, what do you want? And is this realistic to achieve? So for me, I was going to work, and I think I consider myself as one of the best employees if I would have kept on faking it like I did. I did my job. I did everything to everyone's satisfaction. I was innovative. I was on time. I was a hard worker. I was doing everything that you can imagine. I was really embodying the company values. So nobody would ever have thought that I am miserable within. And getting up every morning at the same time, doing the same thing that is not fulfilling you, that is literally, it was a sense of, what am I doing with my life kind of scenario, where I was wanting to be completely somewhere else, doing completely different things. And because I am determined, and I always was, but I'm also highly sensitive. So I knew that this environment was just breaking me. And I wanted to change that. I wanted to get out of there for all costs, because being exposed in a huge office, constantly disrupted, interrupted, and bothered by small talk, which is the worst thing you can you can do to me is ask me how the weather is and how I'm doing if you don't care, because I will sense it and I will cut you short and I will get that conversation going like real humans. And then doing on top of that something I did not care for and being limited by the contract, how much I can earn, how much I can work, or how much I have to work. It goes both sides. Like if I had to do extra hours, I needed to rush myself. And if I was done with my work, I was sitting it out. And then those seeing things not working in the departments, not knowing really why. I think this is just a sense, something I'm born with. Seeing people being unhappy, knowing how I could change it, but you need to just keep your mouth shut because you're not in that position. I was like, I had a feeling I was burying my potential to do something more meaningful. At the time, I had no clue what it could be. But it was just something that I was doing day in, day out, thinking like, really, is this life? Is life being tired by the end of the day? Is life being like, unfulfilled, whatever you do? Is life being going drinking after work because you're just so bored of everything? You need like some dopamine from somewhere. Is life buying the 50th blazer that fits your jeans because you just need to somehow find that satisfaction in whatever? And at some point, I just said, no, it can't be. And the life I'm living right now is such a huge contrast. We are living on an island with, it's very remote. I need to drive 40 minutes to a supermarket, yeah, to get like supplies, 20 minutes to a pharmacy. It's very sweet, cute, nice neighborhood, supportive community, and it's peaceful. I have my home office, I do my work, I'm making an impact globally, and I think this is at all times what I wanted to have.
I love that. So you just felt the pain of not having control over your life so greatly that you said, "You know what? No matter the risk, I have to do something different."
Yeah, and it made me a bad person. I was a bad friend. I was a bad girlfriend because I was not satisfied. I wasn't happy with me, so I couldn't spread that happiness into any other relationship. And since I moved, like I'm a better sister, a better daughter, better friend. I'm having a relationship that is thriving, and I was surprised that this can change like everything once you make the decision and commit to your, let's say, big dream.
Yeah, I love that. Because your cup is full now, right? It's very different when,
It is
you're
cool.
feeling burnout, when you're feeling tired and uninspired, right? So I think there's a lot to be said about that. Just doing what you actually love, being where you actually want to be, having control over your life. I mean, those are the things that we like highlighting on this show. That's why I'm so passionate about entrepreneurship, because it enables that level of freedom. And so for anyone out there listening, if you haven't made the move yet, I mean, that's what we're trying to do with this show, is inspire you to do so. So I love that, and I really appreciate you sharing that. I'm really curious about this journey of failing and then having to go back to the corporate world. So maybe talk about that. Like, what do you think went wrong the first time that you tried to go out on your own? I'm sure a lot, right? I mean, we don't know what we don't
Everything.
know. So when you just jump into it, million things, right, that you're having to figure out for the first time and realizing you're probably unprepared for it. But I mean, what are some of those maybe bigger pieces that kept you from succeeding? And then how did you then later on go back and actually make it work?
So I think why everything failed in first place is I was naive enough to try. And why it actually failed is probably because I overlooked one thing, which is asking for help. There is a lot of wisdom we carry internally, no doubt. And I think I was always a good teacher and always a good coach. This is something that I'm carrying in my DNA. I was always asked for advice. I was always able to help random people who did not know me. I was the girl giving advice in the club, where other people dance and the others cry. I was saving those crying because they were heartbroken, had a fight with their boyfriend. People were approaching me out of nowhere. So this gift I always had, and I thought I'm gonna bring this to the world. So now what I understand today is you can have a gift and intellectual property that you can monetize, but how to monetize it is a whole different world. And I didn't make this distinction back in the day. I didn't ask for help, although I knew perfectly that if somebody would teach me something that I could learn that, I could implement it, and I can move forward. But what was probably the most awkward thing, and I think it has to do with those external noises telling me that you can't do that, you shouldn't be doing that. There was also a lot of shame that I do not know it all. So today, if I don't know something, I would make a simple gap analysis. I would say, okay, where I am right here, right now, what skill sets and resources do we have? Where we want to be? And what do we need to bridge to get to that goal? And that can be either, can I teach this myself? Do I need to hire someone? Do I need support, like otherwise, like an assistant, somebody who takes work away from me? And if I would have done this gap analysis back in the days, I would have learned so much about myself and knowing how to go about it. I didn't do nothing. Still sitting in my corner, pretending that everything is going fine. And it took only 4 years that I had to say, like, nothing is fine. And I need to go back to living my worst case scenario, literally. Failed, dealing with the noises. I told you so. You never should have done that, right? There's like so much coming in where you're like, but guys, can't you see? I mean, I understand you're worried about me, but can't you see that just my big dream shattered and how painful that was? So I was with that alone. Back in corporate, I just chose a job as a assistant of CEO. It was not very demanding. I was working a lot with my psychologist and other mentors, and I just needed a job that has covered my bills and that was not taking me out of my comfort zone and anything, because I think without knowing, I was preparing for a comeback. I wanted to get myself back on track mentally. I wanted to be fit again. I wanted to do my sports. I wanted to live a life again, because at the time I couldn't even leave the house really without anxiety. And being back at that company, I was observing a young man in his early 30s who was growing one department within 3 years from 30 employees to 350,
Wow.
who also became my mentor at some point after he has quit and after I have quit. Our paths spread, and he stayed in Vienna. I moved to Greece in 2018 because I just said, enough is enough. I need to leave this environment where I was told that nothing is possible for me. I'm just gonna go there and see what's gonna happen. This was like one of the biggest risks I ever took. And at some point we connected, and he has helped me to rewrite my story of failure strategically. With those observations in the corporate world I have always made, and with the observations of our society, I have just put my intellectual property together and was like, okay, what can we do now? I started mindset coaching in 2020, 21 again as a self-employed solopreneur. And very quickly I realized, like, cool, I have success and I can teach how people can do the same. So I ended up teaching service providers in the transformation industry how to build a sustainable business without burning out. So what has happened there is that I needed basically 8 years and a lot of help to get everything together that I knew and to put it in something tangible, to put the packaging, so to say, to put the glitter around and say, like, okay, this is what you can make money with. However, what sounds like a huge success story, I believe that there was a lot of work going through this failure and of the question, who are you to do this? Because once you have your mission statement on paper and you be like, I'm going to change the world because I have seen that I can change myself, change everyone around me by changing myself inadvertently. And then you're there, be like, really? Is this me doing this? And then you go out on social media and then you start sugarcoating your content because, don't say what you really want to say because it's not about your thought. It's about blending in. Just be quiet enough. And I think the next big step that I have made in my evolution was to really find my voice, to really speak, to show up as the thought leader I always wanted to be. And this is now maybe 2 years ago where I really do what I really want to do the way I want to do it, which has also not just brought me a lot of success, but the really internal satisfaction. And I do not deal with that cringe feeling anymore when I'm, public. And since last year, I started public speaking, like going on stages, actually expose myself fully and vulnerably to audiences. And I think it needed for me this amount of years, seeing where I came from to get where I am today. And I don't wish would have bypassed any step really, because today I really know deeply who I am, what I want to do, how I want to do it, who I want to be surrounded with, and how much I allow, or how much of what I allow in my life. And that was necessary.
So you said a lot of interesting things. I mean, I think it's amazing that you were able to look back and in retrospect realize all of the different things you had to learn and how all of it had to take that time. It's like a crock pot, or I don't know if they have crock pots in Europe or if you're familiar with that, where it's a slow cooker, right? Where all of the ingredients get added over time, and it just takes a little bit for those ideas and those thoughts to kind of bake together into something more tangible, into something that, like you said, you can put some glitter on and productize, right? And so I'm of the same mindset that a lot of us have to go through certain things for a reason, right? There's something that we need to be learning along the way that that we often don't just pick up as with our first try, right? And they say on average that it takes 10 failed businesses before you finally make it, right? But so I love the process, and I love hearing people's experiences going through that, and kind of the realizations that come up, and the things that um their weaknesses that they end up having to face. And so I think it's really cool just to see your journey in that way. And I just if people listening out there could recognize that no matter where you're at, um I mean, for one, there's always more to go, right? There's always more that we need to be learning and adapting to, and overcoming within ourselves. Um, but recognizing that it's okay for it to take that long, and not beating yourself up over that, and not having this expectation that I need to be successful already, right? That's ultimately what's going to help you get to your goal, is being okay with that process. So I love that, and I appreciate you being willing to share all of that. I think there are a couple things that you said that I think sound like they were really key. So for one, you had a mentor. Two, you moved to Greece, and you said you got yourself away from, I guess, people with a limited mindset, it sounds like. I think those things are huge. Just being able to put yourself in an environment that actually supports what you want to do, having the right people around that you can go to, that you can ask for help with. Are there any other bigger pieces like that that you think really made a difference?
I think in one hand, you said it correctly. It was really going away from the place I no longer wanted to be. It just was getting too tight. It was getting too close. And after you have failed once, or I have failed once, and doing it again in the same environment, I think people would have thought I am insane. I don't know what would have happened. So I needed to go and make something just as insane but different. So they do not really they do not relate to each other. And of course, I needed a job in Greece too. I wasn't yet at that point to have a business in 2018 and to make money so I can sustain my life. And I was working in a dive center in the sales department, and doing internships, mentoring young people. It was a great thing, but again, I found myself in a even worse scenario in tourism. 6 days a week, 14 hours a day. And this was the last push that said, like, okay, now we're reaching our limits, and now you gotta go. In Specifically in Greece, I had my mentoring, but my mentor was abroad. It was everything online, and I did not see this as mentoring at that time. I was just thinking, like, there is a nice person who's trying to help me wherever this is gonna go. If I would have had a plan at that time and have accepted that this is actually a huge thing, I would think things would have gone faster. But I was just like there, and let myself involve in the conversation, not actually realizing how much it helped me and why I'm doing this all. I haven't put that together yet. But then being in Greece, which was like, Greece is a very, very old country, and a very, very old mindset. They listen to the music we listen, like you guys listen in the US 15 years ago. And it's a very close community, families, everything. And that mindset didn't really help me to build a business. But what has helped me is that I was alone with no community. I was making friends along the way because every time you move country, you start over again. And I had all the time to sit in my home office with no distraction. Zero. There was nothing that distracted me. It was me, myself, and we were working. I was spending in this office thinking, being creative, contemplating, having conversations with myself. So I think taking the time and not having the feeling that you're sacrificing something, but that you're actually birthing something so big, enjoying the journey, having fun, and not being sad that you are not going out to the beach every day, although you could. And I think this was the reason because I trusted myself that I would do it this way, that I could quit that job and that company in Greece almost immediately when I decided it and be like, cool. And now I give myself 1 month and I want to see money, any kind of money coming into my business. And I did. And then I realized, like, okay, when we do the right things without distraction, and actually, the distraction was important so I could actually build all of the trust in myself that I can. Because just being, hearing noises all around is hard to shut them down if people are so close. Yeah, well, here we are, and we were making money. And then 5 years later, or 4 years later, we started traveling Southeast Asia with my partner because we wanted to see something else. And then we moved to Curacao, to the Caribbean 1 year ago, and we were going to stay here for a couple of more years, which has brought me closer to the US, which I always wanted, etc. And another key was, except for turning down the noise, being alone with me and having the time to do all that work, was accepting where I was. Acceptance, like next to determination, consistency, and doing the hard work and everything people tell you, accepting where you are right here, right now, and not trying to bypass anything, which causes huge discomfort. Looking like a beginner in front of camera. If I look back 3 years ago about my videos that I recorded, it was like, oh my God, I so feel for you, girl. I so feel for this young woman trying to do things, like not having a clue, but everything comes really with practice. And once you know what you're not good at and you say, okay, I'm going to practice no matter how long it takes, this is like a catapult. It happens like almost immediately because you're not sitting quietly and, overthinking it on how to do it, but you actually do it. And I think these two things, like getting quiet, taking myself, like I was almost not existing, right, for anyone. And I was doing the work, and I was doing the work I needed to do, which is learning a lot of things. Speaking, being in front of camera, selling. Because I think although I was in sales for a long time, selling your own product is again something completely different because there comes those I don't know, imposter syndrome, whatever it is. I just found out that this is very different. I needed to know how to copyright. I needed to learn so many things. And this is what I was doing, one by one, little by little, one after the other.
I love that. I actually love that you described or you framed it as doing a gap analysis earlier, right?
Mhm.
I think that's really cool. I haven't quite I just haven't spoken with many people that look at it that plainly, but we do that with businesses, right? Where we sit down and we say, okay, how do we get to where our goal is? And what, actually exploring the options that are available to filling that gap. I think it's cool that you are able to do it that way. I want to touch on this idea of kind of, in a sense, escaping the world, escaping the distractions, and really what stood out to me was that in a sense, you're letting go of the FOMO, the fear of missing out on everything, right? And I think that's really fascinating because I think that's what keeps a lot of people stuck and sabotages their businesses, actually, is when they feel like they have to be spending their time doing all the other things that you would normally do if you didn't have to be building a business in your basement or wherever, right? So I think that's really fascinating, is allowing yourself or giving yourself the permission to say, you know what, like I'm gonna put everything aside and I'm really just gonna, buckle down and get into my creative zone, right? Business is such a creative process, and so I really appreciate that you talked about that a little bit. Um, and I just think it's powerful, yeah, and really that's what it takes, is to just be able to remove yourself from the world, the distractions, and give yourself that space to create,
Mhm.
without wanting to be everywhere else. So I think it's amazing that you created an environment that enabled that by moving away, right? And then it sounds like you didn't have any attachments to this job. So when it actually came, and I think that's what it is for a lot of people. They have all of these emotional attachments to their life, their old life, right? And they don't realize that you have to cut all of those ties to be able to then move into the new life, the new business, the new you. And
Yeah.
I think that's a difficult process for people.
It is a difficult process, and I think it's often misunderstood for one main reason. Like we are by nature as human beings, we need to belong. We want community. We are seeking community. But as I realized that building a business is one of the biggest self-development journeys I was on, what has also started to change is my personal needs. And just like I just grew out of the time of having to party every weekend. And I'm not saying I was sitting in my office, which was luckily not a basement. That was my biggest fear, but I was actually on the first floor overviewing the ocean. So I made that first little dream already. And I was just lucky when my mom asked me, how are you going to live by the ocean and you can't even afford a house in a bay? I'm like, well, I can't. I'm going to see. And I met my partner. His family had a house and we lived there. I'm like, sometimes you just don't even have to know how things go. Just please go, right? And um having and I didn't have the need anymore of going out. I mean, I was meeting people, obviously, right? I was doing stuff that was also good for me, but I started to be extremely selective. Let's say you get up early. At that time I was 5 a.m., 6 a.m. I was on my desk working till 7, had my breaks, went on my walks, but it was all creative walks and creative thinking walks, and I was really determined to do that. At 7 p.m., I thought like, okay, I gotta go somewhere now, just to vent or see people or do something. And then you go into an environment and then you sit there and be like, what on earth I'm doing here? I do not, I cannot listen to these conversations. They don't strike me at all. I'm not interested in this kind of people, no longer in gossip, no longer having to talk about people who are not in the room, no longer having to drink 5 beers every evening. And I realized, like, okay, we gotta go somewhere else. And for a long time, I was very lonely because you don't find that connection so quickly, and not in Greece. But then little by little, as I went on the search, I found one lady who I connected with who was running a business and building her third venture in that small village that I didn't even know. And then I found another lady who was just at home with her twins that were about like 1.5 years at the time. But she had time and she was really on my level and we could talk life and things. So I just cut short everything that I didn't want to anymore, which at some point was also in a small village like this, be like, ah, she doesn't want to be with us anymore. Who does she think she is? Like, and my partner who was involved in that old working environment was like, why is she no longer coming anymore? Are we not good enough? And I just said, you know what? Leave it. If they have a question, send them towards me. I can answer everything. But I realized that my needs, personal needs, changed. I started running again after an injury. I started taking care of myself, and it was everything like so much flow since I started doing that. And I think therefore I never felt really like not a sense of not belonging or sacrifice because it felt just right. And this stuck with me until today. I no longer immerse myself in conversations that are not fueling me. Don't get me wrong, I'll be there for you. If you need to vent, if you have an issue, I'll be listening to you. But if something truly is draining me and never ever I get something in return, as in a mutual relationship, You bet, I'm out very quickly of that. So this was also something that I learned. And with that, I think literally everything has changed.
I
And
love
it's
that.
not like when we strive for this life balance, like I had literally in Vienna for 30 years. I mean, probably it was 10 years. I consciously, like a decade that I was observing myself, trying not too tired after work so I can participate into the after drinking after hour thing. At the same time, needing to go to the gym, be fit while drinking 3 times a week, going out on a weekend, being out till 6 a.m. in the morning because everybody is doing it, but still wanting to perform on the table, having lunch with my family, and all these things, like trying to find that real good balance. I just realized it doesn't exist because life comes in phases. And if you immerse yourself in that phase fully, internally, you're going to get so much more out of that. Because when we traveled Southeast Asia 4 years later, I was working 4 days a week. And 3 days a week, we've been traveling and exploring, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia with my partner. So it was a different phase. And now we moved to Curacao, and now I'm living a pretty steady life. Now I have the time again to go dancing. Now I have the time again to go scuba diving because all the things I have done, and I guarantee you, the next phase of having to immerse myself in this office day and night is just behind the corner. And we do the wave again and I think this is more life than just having to have everything, leveled out equally in balance, if this makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it does. I think yeah, it's interesting to think about the different phases of life, right? But um, just the fact that you recognized what was toxic about certain phases, right? And we're able to just let go and move away from that. I think that's powerful. A lot of people, I think, struggle with that so much because they care about how others will perceive them, or maybe they're just afraid of the change and the unknown of what comes with that, right? So I think it's powerful that you didn't let those fears or doubts hold you back. You just recognized what was actually benefiting you and what wasn't, and moved in the direction of living your best life. And so I think that's very cool. I just realized that we're pretty much up on time. This has been such a fun conversation. Where can people go to connect with you and learn more about what you're doing?
I'm active on Instagram. This is where you find me almost every day. You can find me on LinkedIn. And I have a podcast, Online Business by Design, where I'm talking a lot about this topic, mindset marketing for digital businesses and for service providers in the transformational industry. So this is where you can find me. You can also reach out to me per email, where I'm also personally sitting in that mailbox. It's Ivana at fabulous-foundation.com.
I love that. We will have links to everything in the show notes. So if you want to go there to connect with Ivana, you'll have everything you need. Thank you so much again for being on the show. This is we almost need to have you back on because there were a lot of things that we didn't even get to talk about that I wanted to touch on. But
It's your
but I
privilege,
really,
Let's do
yeah,
it.
yeah, I think we should. But it's been great. If there's one final message that you could leave with our audience to inspire them or encourage them or just give practical advice, what would it be?
What would it be? I believe that you can achieve anything. And if it comes to business, get clear what you want, why you want it, because this is what will get you out of bed. This is what will make you do the things you need to do and not having FOMO, as you mentioned it. And then go the right way about it. Don't waste your time in crafting the best offers for 2 years in a hidden corner. Get over yourself, share your message publicly, speak about your work, build that community, get visible, get that people in your world, and then go ask them what they need from you, and then build that offer, then make that offer, and you will make sales. Not any other way around, but do the work. Because I believe everything is within you. We are here for a reason, listening to these conversations like you didn't end up here by simple accident.
I love that. I love that. I especially appreciate your message of getting visible because as a marketer, it's so important. And uh, I recognize that means overcoming your fears of self-doubt, of, imposter syndrome, all of that. But it's the only way to build a business. You have to put yourself out in the world and share
I'm a
what you're doing.
professional in that field. Whenever you have a question, reach out. Like fear of rejection and judgment is my cup of tea, and I'm immersing myself in this topic for more than a decade in observing people's behavior, as also having studied sociology. So knowing how we interact as an individual and within society is one of the most interesting things. And none of it is really fatal. There's always a solution to it, which I personally love.
That's a great way to frame it, right? It's not going to kill you. So I love that. I love that. This is a perfect way to end this episode. Thank you again for being here, Ivana. For anyone listening out there, make sure you're subscribed and following us on all our platforms so you don't miss an episode. Please share this with anyone you can. That helps us out a lot. Thank you again for being here. And for everyone, we'll see you in the next episode.